There's a moment when someone notices you, not because you said something brilliant, not because you tried to be charming, but because you didn't say anything at all. You were still silent, composed. While everyone else tried to be seen, you sat back and let their needs speak for them. And in that moment, something shifted. You became the question. You became the unknown. And in human psychology, there is one rule more powerful than desire itself. What we can't understand, we can't stop thinking about. Most people try to be liked. They try to be relatable. They try to be clear. But Machiavelli would tell you, obsession is not born from clarity. It's born from mystery. The more they think they know you, the faster they move on. But when they can't figure you out, when they don't know what you want, what you feel, what you're planning, you take root in their mind like a riddle that can't be solved. You don't become magnetic by being understood. You become magnetic by being unreadable. And that's the first law of obsession. If they can predict you, they can control you. But if they can't, they follow you. They watch you. They talk about you. And without realizing it, they give you power. Let's be clear. The goal is not to get attention. The goal is to make people unable to look away. Not because you asked them to. Not because you begged. But because your presence destabilizes them. You don't reveal. You don't chase. You don't explain. And yet you control the tempo of every room you enter. But first, we need to kill the illusion you've been sold your whole life. They told you, just be yourself. They told you, speak your truth. They told you, the right people will like you for who you are. And yet the people who hold real power, the ones everyone stares at, gossips about, tries to impress, those people are rarely the most open, vulnerable, or expressive. They're the ones who remain unreadable while others unravel. The ones who speak less and make others speak more. The ones who hold silence like a weapon and let other people drown in it. Because here's the truth Machiavelli understood before most psychologists were even born. People don't chase what they fully possess. They chase what escapes them. They don't obsess over answers. They obsess over questions. And if you can become the question, you become the obsession. Let's go deeper. Obsession doesn't start when they meet you. It starts when they can't stop replaying that meeting in their mind. When you gave them just enough to make them curious, and then you vanished. You didn't text back. You didn't explain your mood. You didn't follow up. And now they're stuck. Not with you, but with their own thoughts about you. This is the difference between attraction and psychological capture. Attraction is surface. It fades. But capture? That's the loop that never closes. And it starts with one move. You deny them closure. You don't resolve the tension. You don't explain your silence. You let them imagine why. Because the moment you explain, you kill the myth. And no one obsesses over what's already been solved. Machiavellian strategy doesn't say, be likable. It says be uncomfortable to ignore. And you do that not by being loud, but by being undefined. Not blank, but deliberately incomplete. Because the human brain will fill in the blanks, and what they project onto you will always be more powerful than what you could have said out loud. Now, you might ask, how do you create that effect? How do you become unforgettable without chasing attention? Here's the structure. You must operate on 3 layers of power, presence, pattern disruption, and psychological detachment. Master these, and you don't just influence people, you haunt them. You walk into a room. Everyone is talking, laughing, showing off, competing. You don't. You hold back. You take in the room. You don't rush to speak. You don't fidget. You don't perform. Instead, you ground yourself. You make your silence intentional. You allow space between their words and your reactions. What happens? The room adjusts. People feel the shift. Because you're not feeding their energy, you're absorbing it. And when they realize you're not playing the same game, they start trying to pull you in. They lean toward you. They ask what you think. They try to crack your shell. And that effort, that frustration, is the beginning of obsession. Because most people confuse silence with weakness. But the Machiavellian knows silence isn't absence, it's presence without need. And presence without need is the rarest thing in the world. Most people are predictable. You compliment them, they smile. You insult them, they get defensive. You flirt, they flirt back. You ignore them, they chase. But if you want to be unforgettable, you must shatter these patterns. You don't react the way they expect. Someone flatters you, you stay neutral. Someone insults you, you remain calm. Someone tries to bait you, you don't bite. Now what happens? They get confused. And when people are confused, they become hyper-focused. They replay. They analyze. They try to decode. And every time they can't, you take up more space in their mind. Because the brain hates unfinished loops. And if you can become the loop that won't close, you become the fixation that won't fade. This isn't manipulation. It's control. And control, used with precision, makes you unforgettable. This is the final move, and the coldest. You must appear emotionally self-contained. Not numb. Not distant. Just untouchable. If they pull back, you don't chase. If they insult, you don't defend. If they praise you, you don't melt. But because obsession doesn't form when you meet their energy. It forms when you destabilize it. Think of the most addictive people you've met. They didn't try to win you. They made you try to win them. And every time you thought you had them figured out, they changed direction. Not for drama, but because they weren't attached to your validation. And that's what makes people obsessed. Not how good you are to them, but how much they need to understand you and never fully can. Let's put this in a real-world setting. You're in a conversation. Someone says something flirtatious, provocative, or even condescending. Most people would laugh, deflect, or banter back. But you pause. You let the silence stretch. You let them feel the weight of your gaze. Then, instead of replying with energy, you respond with neutrality. Is that how you see it? 5 words. Calm, flat, and ice cold. What just happened? You flipped the pressure. Now they're the ones unsure. They start backpedaling. They try to reframe. They look around for social validation. And in that moment, they're no longer leading. They're reacting to you. Machiavellian power is not about dominance. It's about frame control. Whoever reacts last controls the scene. And if you can hold your stillness longer than they can hold their mask, you win. Every time. But there's a deeper level. You want to create obsession? Then you must become impossible to win over completely. Not aloof. Not arrogant. Just slightly out of reach. Because the moment someone feels like they've got you, the chase ends. And when the chase ends, so does the desire. This is why Machiavelli warned against transparency. He knew that once people can fully see you, they no longer respect you. Because respect is born from distance. And distance, not emotional but psychological, creates gravity. That's why kings built castles. Not because they were in danger, but because the distance made people revere them. Today, your castle is your composure, your mystery, your unwillingness to be fully known. And that's what turns interest into obsession. Now let's get surgical. You want to collapse someone into obsession without touching them, without pleading, without lifting a finger? You use the void. You become present, and then suddenly absent. You engage just enough to light a fire, and then disappear before it burns out. You don't ghost. You don't punish. You just vanish. No explanation. No closure. And now the flame is theirs to tend. You handed them the question, and no answer is coming. What happens? They talk to friends. They check your page. They replay every word. They invent theories. They fill in the silence with projection, fear, desire. And all of it, comes from you doing nothing. This is the art of obsession. You don't feed the fire. You let them burn in their own unanswered questions. But this requires discipline. It requires detachment. It requires understanding one of the rarest truths in human interaction. People don't want truth. They want tension. And the moment you break that tension with too much clarity, the spell is broken. Machiavelli would call this the art of holding the frame. Never fully giving yourself. Never fully disappearing. Just enough presence to haunt them. Just enough absence to become sacred. And once that balance is struck, they're hooked. Not to who you are, but to who they imagine you might be. Now let's move from theory to practice. How do you become that presence in everyday life? You speak less. You pause longer. You ask more questions than you answer. You show just enough emotion to feel real, but never enough to feel needy. You let others perform, and you observe. Because the one who watches owns the room. And the one who doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't explain, becomes the one everyone orbits around. There will be those who say, "But isn't this manipulative? Isn't it cold?" What's cold is trying to force people to like you. What's cold is chasing validation until you forget your own worth. This is presence. This is restraint. This is Machiavellian calm. And calm is rare. Rare things become valuable. And valuable things become obsessed over. Let's crush the final illusion. You don't need to be the smartest, funniest, or most beautiful person in the room to become unforgettable. You need to be the most self-contained. The most composed. The one who could speak, but chooses not to. The one who could react, but doesn't need to. The one who doesn't need anything, and yet makes others feel like they've lost something just by not having your attention. That is the final move. That's when people start speaking your name in rooms you've never entered. That's when their curiosity becomes fixation. Their confusion becomes need. Their interest becomes obsession. Because the man who never reveals his full hand becomes the one they keep coming back to play with. Being ignored. Because rejection gives them an answer, a wound they can bandage. But being ignored gives them no closure, no context, no control. And that's why it's obsession's sharpest blade. You don't need to insult someone to disturb them. You just need to offer silence where they expected recognition. You just need to observe when they expect engagement. Because silence, in the Machiavellian toolkit, is not absence. It's dominance without noise. The person who can ignore the room becomes the gravitational center of it. But here's the twist no one talks about. This isn't about arrogance. It's about emotional self-sufficiency. The reason silence works is because it signals one thing louder than any word ever could. I don't need your validation to exist fully. People are drawn to what doesn't need them, but because it forces them to question their own value. And if you can force someone to look inward while staying centered outwardly, you've just planted a seed they will water with their own attention. Now let's talk about ambiguity, the Machiavellian's favorite disguise. Ambiguity isn't vagueness. It's intentional misinterpretation bait. When people can't figure out what you meant, what you feel, what you really want, they spiral. They start assigning meaning to every word, every gesture, every silence. And the more they interpret, the more they become entangled in the myth they're building. Think about it. You don't answer a message right away. You saw it. You could have replied. But you didn't. And now they're wondering, is he playing games? Did I say something wrong? Is she not interested, or too interested to play it cool? And all of this is happening in their mind, while you sit still, untouched. They don't even realize it, but they've handed you power. Not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't. Machiavelli once said, "Men judge more by the eye than the hand." Today, we could translate that to, they believe more in what you signal than what you explain. If you act detached, calm, unfazed, people assume you're in control, even if chaos swirls inside you. And that assumption? It's often more powerful than reality. Let's go into relationships. Everyone tells you to communicate more, to be open, to be honest about your feelings. And that's true for people who want peace. But if you want power, if you want to be unforgettable, if you want to become the person they never stop thinking about, then openness is the beginning of invisibility. Mystery is the currency of psychological gravity. The moment they know how you feel when you'll reply, what you want, they categorize you. And once they've placed you in a box, they move on. So here's the paradox. The more you try to connect by revealing everything, the less connection they actually feel. But because connection isn't born from emotional transparency, it's born from emotional tension. That tension is crafted like a razor's edge. One moment of vulnerability, followed by retreat. One hint of desire, swallowed by silence. One glance, then nothing. And now you are all they think about. Not because you're better, smarter, or more attractive, but because you became an emotional contradiction. And the human mind cannot ignore contradiction. Let's sharpen this. You want to be desired? Then master the art of being both present and unavailable. Let them see you, but never touch the full version of you. Let them feel the warmth, but never own the flame. That is how myths are created. And humans? We don't fall in love with people. We fall in love with stories we tell ourselves about those people. If you reveal too much, you take away their story. If you reveal too little, they lose interest. But if you reveal just enough to make them build the rest, now you live in their head rent-free as their creation. And that's obsession at its core. Let's zoom out into leadership, social circles, and public presence. Do you want to know why some people dominate rooms without ever raising their voice? Because they don't react. While others compete to be heard, they observe. While others rush to clarify, they pause. They don't need to win, because everyone assumes they already have. This is what Machiavelli meant when he spoke of a prince who appears commanding without cruelty and powerful without exposure. If you speak every time you're challenged, you exhaust your presence. But if you withhold, if you pick your moments, then every word becomes a strike. Think of the most charismatic leaders, CEOs, or icons you've ever seen. They don't talk more, they talk less. And the less they say, the more everyone listens. Here's the secret. The less available you are, the more valuable you become. Scarcity creates weight. Now, the ultimate Machiavellian twist. You don't just want to create obsession. You want to make people feel like they chose it, like they pursued you, like they discovered something rare. Because the moment they think it was their idea, their attachment deepens. It becomes prideful, defensive, territorial. You become their secret, their story, their fixation. And they will now protect their obsession with you, even from themselves. But how do you create that illusion? You make it seem like they earned your attention. You give them brief access, short moments of intensity, then pull it back. You reward their efforts, then test their patience. You give warmth, then coolness. This rhythm, this unpredictability, keeps them in the game. And like a gambler who almost wins every time, they start chasing the jackpot that doesn't exist. And that's the trick. They become addicted not to what you give, but to what you withhold. Let's finish with the final form of this strategy, aura. Aura is the presence you carry when you walk in a room and don't need to speak. It's the energy that makes people second-guess themselves around you. It's the silence that creates gravity. You don't build aura by demanding respect. You build it by embodying restraint, stillness, purpose, focus. When people can't tell what you're thinking, they project greatness. When they can't tell if you like them, they try harder to earn it. When they can't decode your silence, they fill it with fear, desire, or admiration. Aura is not loud. It's not flashy. It's built from the discipline of withholding, of staying centered while others spiral. And in a world addicted to overexpression, restraint is the ultimate signal of control. That is how you make people obsess over you. Not by chasing, not by pleasing, but by mastering the psychology of mystery, presence, and emotional power. And the best part? You don't even have to say a word. Most people live their entire lives trying to be chosen. Chosen by a partner, a friend group, a client, a crowd. They tailor their words, their outfits, even their smiles to become more digestible, more likable, more pick-me. But here's the brutal Machiavellian truth. The more you try to be chosen, the less power you hold. Because whoever is auditioning is not in control. And that's the power reversal nobody wants to talk about. Wanting to be liked is weakness disguised as politeness. Because the person who is obsessed with being liked is obsessed with not being rejected. And obsession, real, gravitational obsession, only flows one way, toward the person who doesn't flinch at rejection. So what does that person look like? They don't explain themselves. They don't announce their worth. They don't seek connection. They command attention through absence. This is the moment when your psychology becomes Machiavellian. Not manipulative, but elite. Cold, not in cruelty, but in clarity. You realize, being liked by everyone means being owned by anyone. But being respected by a few means being unreachable by all. This shift, from being emotionally hungry to emotionally independent, changes your energy. It makes people lean in, but because they feel something they haven't felt before. A presence that doesn't need anything from them. And in a world starving for attention, that's the rarest aura of all. Now, let's talk about withdrawal, the Machiavellian art of absence. Most people try to increase their value by giving more time, more compliments, more reassurance. But in power psychology, value increases through restriction, not access. You don't become rare by being always available. You become rare by being seen, felt, and then suddenly gone. Your withdrawal isn't punishment. It's silence loaded with meaning. You don't leave in anger. You leave in poise. You don't block. You vanish. You don't react. You let them miss your stillness. And what happens? They panic. They reach out. They question what they did wrong. They romanticize the moments they once overlooked. Because they thought your presence was normal. They didn't realize it was a privilege. Until it was gone. Machiavelli understood this better than any dating coach, influencer, or life strategist. The most powerful thing you can do in any dynamic, business, social, or romantic, is control your availability. Not with mood swings. Not with games. But with self-respect so high, it reorganizes how others treat you. Because nothing makes someone obsess over you more than the haunting realization that you were the one they couldn't keep. Let's break the illusion of the charming person. You've been told charm is in charisma, the smile, the warmth, the laugh. But that's surface level. True obsession is not created through charisma. It's created through contrast. When you walk into a room with stillness, surrounded by those desperate to be seen, you immediately create tension, contrast, an interruption to the normal social script. You're not flirting. You're not smiling. You're not rushing. You're watching. With focus. With indifference. With stillness that unnerves. And that makes people perform. They start laughing louder. Moving closer. Asking questions they never would have dared before. And the more they perform, the more they reveal their insecurity, while your silence grows in weight. And now the power shifts. You're no longer part of the conversation. You are the event. Let's go into emotional control, the final edge. Obsession is not created through presence alone, but through emotional asymmetry. That means you stay flat while they rise and fall. You stay calm while they overthink. You remain centered while they spin scenarios in their mind. You don't brag. You don't pose to be seen. You let your silence speak louder than your image. And because people fear silence, they fill it with meaning, and the meaning becomes obsession.